name is Maeve Clancy. I am an artist who works in cut paper and story. The exhibition is called 9 and it's about being 9. All 4 of us who were invited to take part were given a study called Growing Up in Ireland to look at. We were given the one that focuses on this particular age of 9 and then had to take from it what we wished and make artwork based on that for children. So the piece I've made is a cut paper and story piece. I'd done a kids exhibition a few months before and I've been looking at the hidden places of children, so that's places that children go to that are outside of the adult world. And so for this I've been looking at children's proximity to nature, how much time they're spending in nature, and I was interested in the idea that not spending time in nature contributed to attention deficit disorder or to anxieties in their life. So I was interested then in looking at this idea of nature and their lack of exposure to nature and making a natural space indoors that they could explore. The piece I made is actually telling a story of when I was a kid. I grew up in a big family and we were always making things and kind of having adventures and doing things on our own. And one thing we did when we were quite young was to build a crannog. So I decided that I wanted to tell this story but also make a crannog out of paper that kind of was like a reconstruction of that kind of, not just the item we made, but I suppose that activity. The study was talking about children having a lot less freedom, actually a lot less independence, and playing much more in smaller groups. And I found that in kind of telling the story of building the crannog, it made me realise how much independence we had, how much freedom we had, how much responsibility we had, and that we always played together as this kind of group or did things as a group. So I suppose I was interested in telling a story like that that was very different to what we'd seen in the study. I wanted to use colour and screen printing and had been playing around with using just block colour, and so that's what I ended up doing. So there's 3 layers of leaves that are in front, and those are all screen printed block colour that I've screen printed myself. I had the story very clear in my head. It's also a little bit about the writing of it. You realise how the bits that you remember will fit in together to make the story work as well. So it is as I remembered, but you also are putting in the parts that you know are going to work together and tell a coherent story. It took me a while to figure out how to make the crannog out of paper and not just rebuild it out of paper, if that makes sense. So instead of making pieces that were like the individual pieces of the crannog and sticking them together, I decided to make it as much as possible in one piece. So the entire circular wall of the crannog is all one piece of paper. Within that are sections that have the comic on them, and they're all one part of the same piece of paper, they're not stuck back on. So that was playing around. There was a lot of experimentation, and then a lot of the process I kind of had an idea of what I was doing, but even then in cutting it out and putting it together, as much as possible to kind of keep it that it is paper, so when people are inside they're looking around and they're interested to find that this can just be made with paper, but obviously structurally it has to stay up. And so I ended up getting a frame made by a guy who does curtain rails. But it's just figuring out that that was enough, that I could hang it off that and it would still stay up and not be too much and not make it too heavy. Well, the roof was meant to be a little less rippled originally. I suppose I was making the roof in sections, and when I came to do the install here in the lab, first off I realised I need to add a bit of length onto it, and secondly that it wasn't really I was making it flat as opposed to kind of in a cone shape, if that makes sense. And so it was going to have a ripple to it. But in fact, by the time I worked out that that would be the best way of making it, I liked the idea that it wouldn't be a really flat structure, because the wall being all one piece, it's lovely that that's quite a smooth flat paper structure, and that there's then a bit of texture in the roof, which actually the original roof's crannog would have had quite a bit of texture. And the idea, I suppose, the leaves is that you've got to walk through and enter into the space. And like with most of my stuff, the idea is that you take people out of the space that they're coming from and make them enter your space, and they slow down a bit, and the kind of logic of that world is all that they kind of take into account.